Greetings and salutations, my demons and ghouls.
Welcome, everyone, to a Halloween edition of We Got Nothing here at Life on Saturn Productions' glorious podcast. And I am your host, the one who channels the inner workings of darkness here in the North Country, Catalyst Jost. So, today on this episode, we are going full on horror throttle. And by that I mean everything from classic horror films to classic horror games to modern horror to a few of our fellow YouTube channelers that have inspired me in terms of my love and knowledge of horror. It's here to help us navigate. We have one Mr. Kenny, aka Captain Fatso. Please tell me, do you have any change? Tufts, what is good, my dude?
Not too much. Just hanging out. Ready to talk about some horror here.
Word. Now, first and foremost, how have things been this kooky and spooky October?
Not too bad. This house definitely has a ghost. I would like to start off with that. It opens the doors at nights, and Zach said it was a dick. So, Ghost, if you're a listener, I don't think that you're a dick. I think you're a nice guy.
Now, when you say Zach says it's a dick, do you mean like it's a literal walking penis, or...
Oh, no, just a all-around bad guy. It changes the radio station on him, messes with the fans.
Ghost, if you can hear us, that's some fucked up shit you're doing to our friend right there. Now, what is it? Yeah, is it bad that I have not done any kind of costume shopping whatsoever?
I don't think so.
You know, honestly, since going bald, I think that actually opens the avenue to a multitude of more costume options because, A, I can do shit like wigs, and B, if I'm really lazy, there are so many, iconic bald characters.
You could be Max Payne from Max Payne 3.
Yes, or I just get a white t-shirt, these jeans here, and I'll be Mr. Clean, the tan version, obviously.
Yeah.
Or... what was it? I was also considering going for Halloween as Walter White there. I mean,
that would be a good one.
I already have, like, bits and pieces that could be considered his, like, school teacher getup, and all I would really need is his glasses and his hat there.
And maybe blue meth. I mean, is that part of the costume? Do you just get rock candy?
I mean, I guess blue meth doesn't...
How authentic?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I wouldn't say the blue meth is essential to it, although there probably would be many who disagree. But at the same time, that opens the floodgates for a lot of creativity, because, there could be rock candy, or I could go, blue Jell-O. Everyone loves Jell-O.
Everyone does love Jell-O.
They turn out to be Jell-O shots.
We can go all out and get the hazmat suit.
Oh, dear Jesus.
The hazmat suit, Walter.
I guess it would depend how dedicated I would be for that. Speaking of classics, now, so horror has definitely been a huge part of our lives. The way I started off with, especially as a little kid, I was huge. One of my uncles had introduced me to stuff like what I would consider to be the classic monster films of our times, these being stuff like Jason, Michael Myers, and especially Freddy. I remember, I think I was in first grade, and I got written up. I got chewed out for singing the Freddy song in class, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for... Yeah, teachers do not like that shit.
Yeah, teachers do not dig that. I remember one time I heard the word necrophilia in a Rob Zombie song, so I asked my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Finnegan, I was like, hey, what does this word mean? And he just looks at me and goes, never ask me that. You don't need to know that word. But I thought we needed to know all words, so I hit the dictionary, I looked it up, so I went back up to his desk and I went, necrophilia, and defined it for him.
How'd that work out?
I definitely got, that was my first ISS, I think.
See, that's fucked up if you really think about it. Not the part that you actually define necrophilia, but that he would send you into in-school suspension for it because,
He denied me knowledge.
Oh, God.
I just wanted to learn. I was inquisitive.
And, if there are words you don't want to be defined, then they should be properly listed out. I'm just saying.
Yeah, let's get some edited dictionaries.
Oh God.
The kid-friendly Websters.
I mean, technically, there's already so many edited dictionaries. That's what Urban Dictionary is. Like, I mean, hell, they use Urban Dictionary terms in the current Webster dictionaries. Now that's fucking scary.
It's bleeding over.
But, like, what is it? Seeing. Now, before the Michaels and the Freddys, the monsters of the time, especially when cinema really came out, was definitely that of Dracula and Frankenstein and the Mummy, all of which had so many core themes. I mean, what is it? I mean, Dracula was made like 1700s, I want to say, and it's like
Yeah.
what, like 5,000 pages, and it's just like to see how the vampire genre has evolved from such an old book. It speaks to the timelessness of such a classic. And I mean, and jumping over to Frankenstein, there Frankenstein was the first science fiction story. Like
Yeah.
it definitely had its realms in horror, but like what is it? It was the first time that something that could be foreseen within the realms of science and possibility start to like take shape in the world, you know?
Yeah, and all those movies when you see them, there's like there's almost like there's always this defying death or living forever aspect to the character. Like Dracula's immortal, Frankenstein is made up of dead people's parts. The Mummy rises back from the dead.
And they all have their source of kryptonite, like Dracula more so, especially from old style like tropes. Sunlight obviously the most effective one, but and then there have been stuff that has varied throughout the years, ranging from the garlic, the stake through the heart, the signs of something holy. Because what is it? That's what a lot of gothic horror was really based in, especially from the perspective of Poe, because gothic horror was everything unholy at the time, and especially back then, that was fucking horrifying. And then you see, as time goes on, that like not just cinema but also literature in the horror genre starts to really evolve. I mean, what is it? The two biggest names that come up in terms of the shaping of horror, definitely Edgar Allan Poe, that was said before, and also for better or for worse, Howard Philip Lovecraft. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Lovecraft had a, what do you call it, a sense of the world that transcended beyond the physical. Like a lot of the horror based in Lovecraftian fiction is that of the philosophical, the thought of that. I mean, we always knew this. We are not the most intelligent creatures within the known universe. The universe not only knows we exist, but it also does not give a flying fuck, because a lot of these monsters and entities seen within Lovecraftian horror, they're just indifferent. And that's one of the core themes there. The scariest thing of the fear of the unknown, and the fact that like to the universe we're probably no different than that of a termite.
And I mean, Lovecraft he had such an influence on everything. I mean, writing, movies. You see his influence through a lot of the Ridley Scott Alien films. A lot of his designs bled over into that. You have to wonder how much of the Japanese kaiju horror comes out of that, the giant creatures that he described.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Lovecraft too is that like he was definitely a unique individual, definitely for worse in many aspects. He was a xenophobic racist, but he was a deeply alienated and disturbed man. I mean, a lot of Lovecraftian imagery that he describes in his writings are actually that from nightmares, nightmares of Cthulhu, the Chimera, and these entities that have no humanoid shape and aspects about them that are disturbing to the human eye, like multiple sets of tentacles and gelatinous forms, the especially the multiple unblinking eyes. That's where I get my personal fear of spiders from. When you look at magnified images, like
The eyes, yeah.
Oh my god, the pure blackness in the eyes and the way that they're set up on the face, it's absolutely disturbing. It's like, what is it looking into? Why doesn't a spider blink? And then you add in other scarier aspects of it, like the pincers, the gaping maw. It's truly disturbing.
See, I would never get close enough to make the eye contact with it. For me, it was always the legs. The multiple legs running at you, I was like, oh, nope, I'm out.
Exactly. And I find it funny because my favorite superhero is Spider-Man. So you can see the irony right there.
He's much more terrifying than he is.
Yeah, and on the horror, on the cinema aspect of horror, you see the graduation from one era to another with, again, movie characters like Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers. These are the universal monster films of the modern day. I mean, there's been crossovers, there's been multiple reboots. Speaking of which, gotta give my 2 cents on that Halloween Kills one.
See, I only watched the Cinema Sins on the Halloween from 2018, and I don't think I need to watch Halloween Kills.
Yeah, I mean, God, I just don't know why it needed to be rebooted in the first place. I could see why they would do it with Friday the 13th, because there hasn't been a Friday the 13th movie since 2009. That was
the reboot, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was kind of what they were going for the reboot. It's like,
what a year.
Yes, middle school years. Now those are actual horror stories. I remember I was walking out of the locker room because we had just gotten done our swimming unit, and then 2 kids that were literally 200 pounds. Those are big kids in 7th grade. One of them just literally picks up the other, slams him, and he falls right on my leg. You hear the bone snap, and at the time I'm just 110 soaking wet. It's just and the funny thing about it was my 13th birthday that happened, and I'm just yeah, the irony's not lost on me.
But I remember one year when I was really young, it was Valentine's Day or something, and I didn't get any Valentine's cards, so my dad was like, I got you. He went out and he bought me Freddy vs. Jason for Valentine's Day, and me and my mom and my dad all sat down and watched it because I was the lonely kid with no Valentines. But that movie, that hit all the notes for me. I remember when there was rumors after that they were going to do Freddy vs. Jason versus Ash.
Ooh, that would have been stellar. Yeah, that shows love right there.
Mm-hmm.
And what was it? It was around my teenage years that I really started looking more at the horror genre. That's when I started watching films. The first time I saw the first Alien was actually on VHS, and Alien still holds up today as probably as a science fiction horror masterpiece. Body horror had been done before, but Ridley Scott definitely brought it to a whole nother game in terms of the gore effects, because the chestburster scene especially still remains to be one of the most iconic images in cinema.
The chestbursters, the face huggers, all the skin contact. That was I remember that was something that always tripped me up as a kid. I was like, oh, they go in through the mouth and out through the stomach.
One fact is, what was it? Alien was actually made at the time as a rape movie for men, and especially if you look at the imagery and know the lore of the xenomorph, it's quite fascinating how they incorporated those themes in there, because the face hugger there, I mean, it looks like, you ever see, the anatomy of it, it looks like a vagina, but, what it inserts into your throat to implant the embryo, it looks like an elongated dick that's missing the tip. And,
Aliens.
Exactly, and the way the chest burster scene happens, like it does draw that question, like, what would happen if a man gave birth? How would that look?
Mm.
Bada boom.
And then it comes full circle in Alien versus Predator when they impregnate the Predator and the Predalien comes out. They do the chestburster scene again. Then you realize that no one's untouchable. I thought that they were the ones who were supposed to stop the aliens. I can't. I have no faith.
If Eleanor Ripley cannot do it, because that's another thing. Ellen Ripley was also one of the first like true female badasses.
I was gonna say shout out to Ripley. That's my Bruce Willis. That's my John McClane from Die Hard. She had the one-liners. She had the action scenes.
I mean, what was it? Schwarzenegger didn't really burst onto the scene until 1984, which came after the first Alien. And Alien also, in the aspect of the final showdown, the final person being a woman, also stemmed from the Halloween franchise, especially with the where the final girl trope was established, was originated.
Laurie Strode, the OG final girl.
Oh my god. I will say this. The modern day takes on Halloween did do that right, especially establishing her character, the trauma of it, and although, again, relating back to this current iteration of Halloween, it did nothing to make the retcon make any sort of sense. More importantly, especially towards the end, and this might be going into spoiler territory, so this is your warning for those who are listening. So towards the end, they, exactly how I was gonna think it would happen. They all gang up on Michael, they beat the absolute piss out of him, cut him up, chop him, I think there's a few shots fired, and what is it? Judy Greer's character nails Michael in the head with a fucking with a hammer there and sticks it right in. And then, as predicted, horribly predicted, Michael does his Frankenstein thing, rises up, and I will admit there was a good montage where he slaughters everyone in a believable fashion, but then, well, believable towards Michael Myers. But the whole time I'm just thinking, okay, so you're doing exactly the same mistake studio execs did like during the 70s and 80s. They turned Michael Myers into a franchise. Now I get that from a business standpoint, from a money-making standpoint, but for what John Carpenter was originally going for with the series, it completely upended it and fucked it up because
Laurie's not his sister. That's what gets me. I mean, even in the Rob Zombie ones, she was still his sister, right?
Yeah, they retconned the fact that Laurie Strode is not Michael Myers' sister in these new iterations of Halloween, and I feel like that is an important plot point that should not have been fucked with in any sort of manner.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like we had watched the Cinema Sins on that Halloween, and I agree with that one. Why it's hard. I get that was the one that got away. But it's weird to me that he would just come back after her again without having some sort of connection.
It makes no believable sense that just because Laurie, and if you look back, Laurie was not the only one who got away. Like there was also, and they actually touch upon this in the sequel. There was the little kids. That are now full-grown adults. There's their own children. But then you're just thinking, it's like, it still don't make any sense other than the fact that they're all in Haddonfield. In which case, if that be the case, I'm sorry, but if there's multiple murders going on, like say here in Plattsburgh, I ain't gonna be staying around here too much long.
And first of all, New Jersey gets it bad. Haddonfield's in New Jersey, right? It's Haddonfield, New Jersey?
I believe so, yes.
Haddonfield and then Hackensack from the Chucky movies. You got to be really careful what town you move into in New Jersey.
Tony Soprano. Not horror, but...
You're going to run into some crime or you're going to run into a doll. And I can't... They're the complete opposites. Michael's like 7 feet tall. Chucky's way down here. Where's that movie?
No, oh my...
Who gets New Jersey in the end?
That would be some Count Dooku Yoda shit right there.
You just see Chucky do it in front. That would be something you would see in a Chucky movie. Him doing little front flips, slashing.
Doll kung fu. Oh my lord. Honestly, that brings us to the modern day horror nowadays. Like, Now, especially through YouTube channels like Dead Meat, shout out to James A. Janice and his lovely fiancee Chelsea. If you guys ever listen to this, I'm one of your good fans. It speaks to the modern day, especially like postmodernism, about dissecting the psychology of some of these of this genre, like on all its tropes. I mean, especially with Halloween, it's like it's been 40 plus years, dudes. If you can't realize that the killer is gonna get up as soon as you give him a thwack in the head, you're fucking stupid. You chop him up, you burn him, I don't know, put him in a holy place. Like, at least they had the sense to do that in the Freddy, in the Nightmare franchise. How has nobody figured this out?
Also, if they retconned Halloween 2, if it's a retcon from Halloween 2, then what's the supernatural aspect? Because all the supernatural stuff about Michael was explained in Halloween 2. They brought in, like, Sam Hain and the spirits.
Yeah, and that's what was originally made Halloween 3 the unique movie that it was, because originally the Halloween franchise was supposed to be an anthology movie series. But after Halloween 3 and the fact that people wanted more Michael, the studio execs were like, fuck it, this is who we are now, and not for the better. When on the other hand, you look at franchises like The Evil Dead that start off with kind of cherry picking at the niche of, say, horror comedy, and then they just like experiments like, hey guys, this kind of worked for us last time, let's go a little bit further here. And by Army of Darkness, they're like, guys, this is who we are. Who the fuck are we kidding?
This is us now. The Evil Dead, it's such a good franchise. The reboot, if it even is a reboot, I mean, Ash is there at the end. Is it just another group of unfortunate kids that wound up at the cabin?
It almost has undertones of a multiverse within the Evil Dead franchise, or even like, not so much that, a paradigm that like every so often, it's almost like a curse. Every so often there's a group of people that go into that cabin, find the Necronomicon, and then shit goes down.
Yeah, because what was it? Cabin in the Woods. Do you remember that one? Cabin in the Woods, wasn't the Necronomicon down in the basement?
Yes, and funny. And another fun fact: the Necronomicon is from Lovecraftian horror, so that also speaks to those themes from the grandfathers of horror. Like, I mean, still today, my two favorite pieces of horror are John Carpenter's The Thing and the 2011 almost remake, but more really a prequel movie to it. Because, what was it? It's the movie that is absolutely perfect. It is the best Lovecraftian horror film to date because it hits off all the right notes. Like, using the 1982 John Carpenter flick as an example, best performances from Kurt Russell and Keith David and all the rest of the cast. That's still my favorite Kurt Russell movie.
Shout out Keith David.
Love me some Keith David.
You made it into Saints Row, buddy, and I love that.
He's made it into everything, but we'll go off more on that later. The overall theme of the movie, like, Carpenter is a master at building tension because we don't even really see the quote-unquote full form of the thing until, like, I'd want to say an hour into the movie. We see what's left behind. Frozen corpses, people going insane trying to kill a dog. And then once we finally get the big introduction, it is the best body horror film I've ever seen, beyond David Cronenberg's The Fly, and the aspect of the gross outness. And that was actually a huge theme in Lovecraft, the body horror, the having to look at something that makes absolutely no human sense and causing that mental snap because you don't know what the fuck you're looking at.
Yeah, and the transformation scenes in those kind of movies, when you see them turning into this, the grotesque monster at the end, it's always a trip because you're like, oh, it makes you feel weird on the inside just seeing it happen.
It still has the best, the best jump scares I've seen. And it also, here was an interesting thing when going back to there. You never actually decipher what the intentions are of the alien itself, other than it must consume life, and it just so happened to land on our planet. Now, that really speaks to that genre of horror, because the scariest thing about it is, again, entities like that make the human mind just go insane by looking at them, let alone how they interact with humanity in general. It comes from intentions that are not just foreign to us, but from a place of indifference. And that's the scariest.
Yeah, and the prequel to the thing that's the one that ends with the dog running away, right?
Yeah, that's what starts up the...
And then the lead to the old one is the dog coming in. I remember seeing that for the first time, and I mean, my dad was hyped. He was like, "Oh man, you got to see the old one now."
Yeah, and also a thing about the prequel to the thing was, it was... And this speaks to how horror has devolved in some ways, because originally they were going to go for practical effects, similar akin of that to the 1982 version, and then studio execs were like, okay, I like what you're doing. This is what we're actually going to do. We're going to do some CGI stuff here. It's going to be so awesome. No, it's not fucking awesome. The movie itself is great, and there are some good practical effects on that, but the CGI at times does ruin it in a way where you're just like, why? And that speaks to the movie industry in general, because, I mean, this is talked about on Dead Meat all the time, that the MPAA fucking guts these movies from their core. I mean, you look at unrated versions of, like, horror films, and you're just like, what the fuck? It's a completely different movie. It's almost I hate to use the Snyder Cut as an example, but... But it's a completely different movie, for better or for worse, and you see the director's true intention, and it makes, as an artist and a fan, it makes you angry that somebody like just guts that for the sake of censorship. Oh wait, can't say that. The MPAA isn't a censor board. At least they don't want to be known as one. But...
And I mean, like, nothing beats the practical effects. Like, imagine if you tuned in to even the Mark Hamill remake of Chucky, and say Chucky was all CG, it would look weird. It wouldn't be the same. You know, they've done the practical effects since the beginning of that series. They've been running under the floor, guiding the doll around. And I remember in, like, that first movie when he's crawling across the apartment floor, that was, like, the first movie that really freaked me out. I was terrified of, like, Cabbage Patch Kids. You know, they had the big heads and the dead eyes.
Oh my god, yes. I'm still shocked that people bought Cabbage Patch Kids then. It's like...
on the you know, on the... I think, you know, the practical effects, and I think it shows a little bit more love, especially in a horror movie. You know, they take the time to get the blood spray right. You know, it just seems a little bit more visceral.
You notice that there also isn't many, standout makeup artists or other production members of the crew that are given enough credit. Like, there are no more Tom Savinis. I mean, so many different artists, like makeup, production design, stunt work especially, like, for the image of these iconic characters like Jason and whatnot, they don't get enough credit nowadays. And you also see horror devolve from the cheesiness of the 80s into... Now, this goes into a topic that I talked to you about recently, where it came last year or the year before during the controversy about Joker, Todd Phillips' Joker. Now, Martin Scorsese, loved that dude, even though he does have some conservative views on movies, said flat out that cinema is dead or dying in place of movies like the It franchise or Marvel or any superhero or any big budget sci-fi action thing. See, I agree with that to a certain extent because you don't often see movies nowadays that are akin to that of Gone with the Wind or Goodfellas, The Godfather, or like even old school movies like horror films like Exorcist. Like that was one of the most scariest movies, one of the most popular scariest movies of all time back then. But here's where I also disagree in the aspect of cinema language and the art of cinema, because there is a difference between a motion picture and cinema, especially within the visual storytelling. It has jumped genres because you see movies like the Nightmare franchise and even Aliens and Predator from way back when, and you see modern horror films like Hereditary, Midsommar, and one of my recent favorites was The Lodge, where it takes a very minimalistic style in terms of its scares and gore, and it builds an atmosphere that is so creepy, so disturbing that it doesn't just like scare you a bit, it makes you uncomfortable. That's where true horror really comes to life for me. Building up, because you even look at old movies like Dracula and the original Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, especially for the technical limitations at the time. They had to use shadows and lighting because there was no color back then to build up the atmosphere, and that's most 90% of what horror films were back then. And with this new wave of art house horror, you see some weird stuff, but it's all presented in a way that's absolutely disturbing and in a lot of cases still sticking with you after the final credits roll.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that's those movies hit so hard is because I think over time it's just getting harder and harder to scare us with the slashing, the blood. We've seen it, and we are getting desensitized to that kind of stuff, and it's kind of on the other side of the practical effects. It's like I really like to see them in movies, but when I was a kid and I saw it, yeah, it freaked me out. But now I'm just like, oh, nice. They did that.
It's hard to shock the audience anymore because it's not too hard to find something shocking online. But where some modern horror films might fail in that regard, there's still some scary ass video games.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. More I know not too recently, but more recently the Outlast series. That was one that really got me. I had a hard time playing that when it first came out. I had like friends come over. I was like, "Hey, you want to play some Outlast while I watch you?"
Now, I'm not a big fan of walking or running simulators, but the Outlast franchise definitely brings on a certain cinema quality to it, especially akin to movies like the Blair Witch Project, the Paranormal Activities, in the realm of that found footage, because like it doesn't just take place from your perspective. The only way you can see and navigate certain environments in the game because of its total darkness is with the camcorder that you have, especially the night vision mode on the camera, and the fact that you also have to make sure that your battery life is fully charged in order to navigate that. It creates a lot of tension, and the fact you can't defend yourself, you always got to run away from what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up too, and because it's like I'm not a huge fan of the walking simulator. You walk around, you find this kind of games, but I think that it works better in a horror game than it does in other genres because it takes away that control. It's not fight or flight. You have to run. You have to avoid all these things that are coming at you. Because, there was Outlast, and then there was another game that was similar to it.
The game that started off that new wave of horror in that specific genre was definitely Amnesia: The Dark Descent.
That was the one that I was thinking of, was Amnesia.
Well, one of the things unique that Amnesia brought to the table was the sanity meter, where not only were you supposed to run from these creatures, but if you even looked at them, the way that the gameplay would work is you would start to go insane. Your vision will blur, there'd be hallucinations, and you'd get a lot slower, and that makes it even more terrifying. even in games where you can defend yourself, like say the Resident Evil franchise, they still know how to create that tension, that atmosphere, and the absolute onslaught of death coming at you. I mean, nowhere was this more prevalent than the Resident Evil 2 remake, where, like, not only did you have to contend with the zombies, with the mutants, but you also had to contend with my boy Big Daddy Mr. X.
Oh, Big Daddy X. Always following, always watching.
You can't kill him until the very end of the game. That's what's most fucked up about it. And, like, it did a good job bringing that style of gameplay from the Outlast franchise, but also giving you the sense that you can outwit it and still defend yourself at certain key moments from him. And to see that come into the modern day, it gives you a newfound appreciation that that us in our generation probably could not appreciate it if we only had, say, the classic horror titles. Although those are good too.
Yeah, and I mean they've made some games like that game that I played that you were watching me the other day, The Forest, where it's similar to like a crafting game. It's a survival game where you have to make a house, make a shelter, go out and find yourself food, but there's the constant threat of these mutant cannibals that are following you around. They run in between the trees. It creates a lot of tension.
And it's so amazing because with the forest, you don't also have to contend with the mutants. You also have to contend with hunger, with weather, with not being sick, and also you gotta build shit, and you gotta take into account how much you eat. Like there are so many complicated game systems that weave their way into the mechanics of it, and it's brilliant. A very highly underrated game, I might add.
Yeah, and it puts you right in the atmosphere that it builds. It immerses you right into it because, like you were saying, you have to survive not only against the mutants, but you have to make sure that you're fed. You have to make sure that you have something covering it when it rains, so that way things don't go out. That you keep your fires lit. If you get past a certain level of insanity in that game, you can start building things like effigies. You can take apart the mutants and put their body parts up to scare other ones away.
Now that would freak me the fuck out. I mean, what is it? And also with the running and walking simulators, those can be done right too, because you also see. Have you ever played Alien Isolation?
Oh, Alien Isolation. Now, Chef's Kiss. That is the best Alien game that you can get your hands on currently.
Yeah, no, it built off the systems of Amnesia and Outlast, but set it in Ridley Scott's universe, making it arguably not just the most, in my opinion, the most fun Alien game, but also the most accurate in terms of the 1979 film, because you look at what Ripley went through there, like, she wasn't really battling that motherfucker. She was just outwitting it and surviving. That's the perfect way to describe isolation, especially because you cannot kill the fucking xenomorph.
Yeah, and if I'm remembering Isolation correctly, when you do kill the xenomorph or it ends up dead, that's when you find the hive in the ship, and now there's just more of them coming after you. And that game too is good in regards that it's a continuation of the series. It's her daughter trying to find what happened to her mother on the ship.
Yeah, right. What is it? What I love about horror in general, it speaks to man's fears, to humankind's fears. Like, I mean, you look at again, Alien is a rape tale for men, while you look at the first Nightmare on Elm Street, especially, like, that is the fear of if you go to sleep, will you wake up again? And more importantly, what kind of realms, what kind of monsters, what kind of atrocities you can dream up of in your own imagination? Because
And Friday the 13th, my personal favorite, is the fear of premarital sex and drinking underage.
absolutely.
If those damn kids hadn't been canoodling and drinking, that little boy with the lumps on his head would have never drowned in that lake, and his mom would not have gone insane.
I think it also speaks to the fear of camping out in the woods. Like, you never know what's out there, and then you also get more complicated horror films. Like, again, going back to John Carpenter's The Thing, that deal with more complicated fears. Like, what are we alone in the universe? And even if we're not, are our neighbors friendly, or do they even care about us?
Yeah.
And then you see movies like, what is it, the Descent, where those speak more to smaller like fears, like claustrophobia. I mean, like, I don't know about anyone else, but if I was stuck in an underground cave, could barely move, didn't know where the fuck I was, I definitely might pee myself a little bit.
Yeah, and there's a movie that I saw when I was younger that it's not. I don't think it's billed as a horror movie, but it definitely made me afraid of being buried alive. Ryan Reynolds is in it. It's called Buried. He's pretty much the only member of the cast. There's like a couple people who call him on the phone, but the plot is that he's like kind of a driver over in the Middle East. He's just working for a company. They get attacked by terrorists and they bury him in a box in the middle of the desert and they hold him for ransom. You kind of like it gives you the claustrophobia aspect. At one point, sand starts coming in and just covering him like he's about to get buried alive.
Do you ever notice that it's the minimal the whole the movies that take the most minimalistic approach that usually yield the most terrifying results? Because yes, there's Ryan Reynolds in Buried. There's one that I can think of recently was Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse. That was it was very subtle because it really spoke to the deterioration of the mental health of being isolated in one space with someone for so long, especially out by the open sea where it feels like freedom's there, but it's so far away at the same time. And you also look at some other classic franchise movies when they first started off with. I mean, Saw was gory, it was in your face, but the real scariness coming from that it was all made by one regular dude who had just had enough of the system. And if you really look at Jigsaw's philosophy in those movies, he really wasn't wrong in what he was doing.
And Saw really got you to think about yourself. It was like, was I ever a dick to somebody? Did I ever fuck anybody over? Because I don't want to wake up on a dirty mattress in a basement one day talking about, you want to play a game?
Yeah, and then you look at movies that pretty much take classic genres and put a modern day twist on it, or just give it a fresh coat of paint, like James Wan's he made the first Conjuring.
Yeah, the Conjuring movies, those were really good movies at first. I mean, I recently saw Devil Made Me Do It, and I think
it had its moments.
It's petering out, but that one had some good plot lines, and it had a couple good scares in it.
Well, the first Conjuring was just a regular haunted house flick, but it just put a fresh coat of paint on it, and what really made it stand out also was its characters.
Yeah, and not to mention, any movie that has that based on a true story tag always gets you a little bit. Because you're like, could this happen?
And then you have movies like The Strangers that show almost next to no blood or swearing at all and are rated R or like highly vilified just because it's fucking terrifying, the concept. Like, what if a random pack of strangers come by and just for kicks wanted to kill you? Especially in the modern day, that's not out of the realm of reality, and I think that speaks more of the terrors of our world.
And there's a movie that I haven't gotten a chance to watch yet, but I believe it's called Hush, where the main character is deaf and there's someone stalking her around her house, and just like the concept of that is terrifying. Like, imagine if you couldn't hear someone.
Well, and here's the thing also, this is also explained on the YouTube channel Nexpo, the Nightmare Expo, where his take on horror is more or less a lot of the disturbing things that we don't acknowledge in our world, like natural disasters, cults, systems in which that are just either purely evil or their intentions are not known. Conspiracy theories that are disturbingly close to home and reality. It's like, I mean, what is it? When you look at that, shit like Freddy and Jason pale in comparison to what could be right next door or across the street.
Yeah, and I mean, even cryptids, those kinds of things will have that effect on you too. I know that they have, some like the Wendigo, Tales of the Mothman, things like that, where you hear them, you hear the name Mothman, and you're like, that's not too scary. But you hear the tales, like the actual stories, and these people swear that they've seen these things out there, and
Urban
that.
legends. I mean, the
Hmm.
Jersey Devil is a really famous one.
Yeah, the Jersey Devil. There was this video that was going around that was from like this vacation spot, I believe, in Italy. There was these people at this monument, and there was some like winged creature flying around. And I looked into it, and it's like not promo for any movie or anything. And I mean, you would have to get a lot of people together and shell out a lot of money to get a bunch of people to act that scared and run away.
And then there are more famous ones that are really hit close to home, like the Bermuda Triangle. What is really lies there?
Yeah.
And I mean, sacred temples, like there are a ton of spiritual places in the world. Salem, Massachusetts. What kind of creepy shit might actually be going on there that we're not aware
Yeah,
of?
because I mean, when you think about just society as a whole, now we don't do those kind of things. Generally speaking, we don't go outside and sacrifice an animal to bring rain. They had all these like supernatural like superstitions back in the day, and they would do all these rituals, all this kind of stuff. You have to wonder, if there was some truth behind that, what kind of energies and those kind of things are left over.
Exactly, because energy does not die or disperse. Well, actually, it does disperse. It kind of changes. It
Hmm.
just changes a different form. So, on this subject, tell me, why do you enjoy horror?
I really like horror because my dad got me into it when I was a kid. Those were the kind of movies that I grew up watching. I grew up watching like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. My dad would always tell me like, it was never Mary Had a Little Lamb before bed. My grandma told me the story of the Babadook before bed. So when that movie came out, that hit home.
Wait, so that's an actual story?
Yeah, that
I
that's
thought
some.
that was just a movie concept.
No, it's like an old tale. The Babadook. Yeah, when that movie came out, ooh, I was changing pants.
Well, yeah, that also speaks to the minimalistic quality of, again, of that type of movie.
Mm-hmm.
Just playing with aspects of the atmosphere, the darkness, like what.
Yeah,
Because for those who are afraid of the dark, it's never the dark itself, it's about what's in it. Kind of like
exactly.
speaking to the fear of claustrophobia. It's not the fact that you're in an enclosed space, it's the fact that you can't fucking move, and that terrifies the shit out of you.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, like my evolution for my love of horror definitely stems from the fact, well, again, speaking to before about my own nightmares, like I have a very vivid imagination. Nightmares have ranged from the pretty basic, like vampires and zombies, to the absolute disturbing. We're talking about flesh being hollowed out and dried up into a yellow husk, or creatures whose faces shift or are made of purely flesh
Mm-hmm.
coming after you or talking to you. And I do actually recall a series of nightmares I had as a kid. This was freshly after watching the first two iterations of Harry Potter, where I was always being chased by a dark black hooded figure. To make sense of it now in my adult years, I could definitely see that as me being scared of death itself and outrunning it, which nowadays, especially this past year, speaks to where my true love of horror lies, and that's the fact one of my writer friends, Virginia Wallace, actually had posted this in a blog. There are usually the two most popular forms of literature nowadays are romance and horror.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why that is because romance, akin to sex and love, that produces life. And while horror, on the other hand, speaks and personifies death. And these are the two themes that not just define every single life, but these are the two questions that every philosopher, scientist, or great modern or original thinking mind have tried to find the answers to. And that's where these tales really spring to life in the imagination. But that's the way
Mm-hmm.
I cope with it, honestly.
Yeah, and I mean, nightmares that when there's, a movie or a game or something like that that has to do with nightmares, it always hits home a little bit because, the when we have nightmares, those are the things that we're afraid of. Like I have a nightmare every now and then where I'm in like this forest, all the trees are dead, they're reaching up, you can't see where they end, they just reach up to the sky, and it always feels like there's something chasing me. So I'm running, I look back and I can't ever see what it is, but there's something there, and it's that kind of thing that leaves you, you wake up, you're sweating, you just it it just really messes with you.
It does leave a certain psychological imprint that very few sources of media or even few experience in life
Mm-hmm.
can really shape, can really last. And with that being said, when it comes to the realms of horror in multiple facets of media, flat out, folks, we got nothing. I would like to thank you kindly, Kenny, for hopping on this
Oh yeah.
podcast, making this an absolutely delightfully terrifying time. And for those who want to see more of what Life on Saturn has currently and in the future, please follow Life on Saturn Productions on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And if you would like to see what kind of content I am soon to produce and currently already have in store, please follow me at Catalyst Jost on Instagram. And for all you beautiful demons and ghouls out there, please keep your vibes dope, keep your zen flowing, and as always, happy Halloween.